plugging in my microphone. Do you hear well the sound? All right. Okay, thank you, Amy Roshi. Thank you for this opportunity and this invitation to share a few things about a piece of art that I have known for a long time. The Adoration of the Mystic Lamp, the painting by Jan van Eyck, is hanging here in the cathedral in Ghent. And I've known the altarpiece since I was a 16-year-old when I saw it for the first time. So I'm not going to approach it as an art historian, nor as a theologian, but I will offer a few points of view, a little bit inspired by our Zen practice. And I will use the share screen a lot. So here we go. All right. So this is the altarpiece in its closed presentation. So that's the way the people in the 15th century saw it in the church, in a side chapel of the church. And we see on the lower register a woman and a man kneeling and two statues. And in the upper register, we see the Annunciation. And I will come back to it to explain a little. And then on top, we see 4 people, 2 women and 2 men. That's the opened altarpiece, which is very different in its content and in its appearance. I mean, the most striking difference is its colorfulness. If you compare to this, the outside, which is like in monochrome tones of ochres, browns, white, grays, a little bit of color. Up, there's some green. On the right, on the sleeves of the woman, there is some green, some really soft vieux pink. And then we have the red of the donor on the left. So if you cover with your thumb the figure on the left, the donor, if you cover the red, you will see that the outside painting is basically almost a grisaille, only in tones of browns, ochres, and red. And then it was presented like this during the year. And then on feast days and on special occasions, the altarpiece was opened. And we have a very different impression, a very different feeling, a very different space. The lower part is one continuous landscape where a lot of people flock together around the lamb on the altar. And the upper register is like a heavenly scene. Within the middle, a triad of Mary in blue, God our Christ in red in the middle, and St. John the Baptist in green, flanked by singing and music playing angels, and then Eve and Adam appearing, coming from a different space, from a dark space, from below, we would say. So the painting was started by a painter living in Ghent, Hubert van Eyck, in 1420. He died in 1426, and the painting was finished by his well-known brother Jan van Eyck. We don't have a picture of him, but it is assumed that this portrait of the man with the red turban in London, in the National Gallery in London, an amazing portrait, around 1430, really the beginning of Renaissance. In Italy, in Florence, We have Masaccio, 1427. And here in the north, we have the Northern Renaissance, really starting with Jan van Eyck. But we're not sure, but it's assumed self-portrait. We don't have so much historical detail on the man, but what we know for sure, one of the things we know for sure, that he was actually on a mission for the Duke of Burgundy in Portugal. He went on a diplomatic mission to Portugal, to Lisbon, and there he painted the portrait of a Portuguese princess, Johanna, who eventually became the wife of the Duke of Burgundy. And I think there is a clear line between the work of Jan van Eyck and then the great Portuguese painter, Nuno Gonçalves. I was fortunate on my visit to Lisbon to visit the National Museum and to see the amazing altarpiece there, which has a clear Eyckian influence. Another interesting aspect of the man's life is that he was an exact contemporary with the great Zen painter Sheshu Toyo in Japan. I think they lived in the same area. 1410, Sheshu was born. So he was 22 when the Mystic Lamp was finished. Clearly, there is no line of influence or something. Two very different cultures, two very different approaches to painting also. This is with ink and water, with brush on paper. And Van Eyck's painting, this is like painted in one session. Van Eyck's painting, they worked on it for 12 years, is painted on old dried oak and glazing of thin layers of translucent oil paint. It's a very different approach to painting. But both have some quality of space and light. So, where to start to talk about the painting? And actually, I would like to introduce a certain perspective, a kind of recollection I have of a walk we did in the late 90s. We organized a walking trip with the Dana Sangha, with Gana Roshi in Italy. And with a group of our Sangha, we went for a 10-day walk in Umbria in the footsteps of Saint Francis. That was the whole idea. So we walked from Perugia to Assisi and then on to Tuscany, really following the trails of Saint Francis, staying in monasteries, enjoying Italian food, walking the landscape, seeing the art as a kind of contemplative practice. And one of the days with our small group, with our small Zen Buddhist group, we stayed in a monastery which was novitiate. I don't know the name so well in English, but it's a specific monastery where young monks are trained to become a monk. So there were about 300 novices in the monastery. And we were welcomed by the novice master. So after we had checked in and after meal, the novice master invited us to do a tour of the cathedral and to visit the chapel of the monastery. So we took some time, we took some moments of silence in the chapel, and he talked a little bit about the work they did there. How do you train young religious people? So towards the end, I asked the father, how do you teach young people to pray? Because he was a novice master, I felt like we had something in common. You know, it was at that time, our beginning role to teach young people or people to teach them to meditate. So I asked him, how do you teach them to pray? And he said, I'm always telling the story of the curé d'Ars. The curé d'Ars is a 19th century French parish priest who became a mystic, like in the second half of his life, and who even eventually became a saint. And the novice master said, I'm always telling the story about the parish priest of Ars meeting the farmer. So in the month of May, in the Christian tradition, in the Catholic tradition, they have the practice of the adoration of the white host. It's placed on the altar, and during the month of May, people come to pray, to adore the body of Christ. So the curé d'Ars noticed that during the month of May, in the morning and in the evening, Julien, this farmer, came to church and was standing at the back of the small church looking at the altar. And he was wondering, you know, he was not kneeling, he was formally not praying. So he noticed that. And the third day, he waited outside the church. And Julien left the church and said, Bonjour, Julien. How are you? You're doing? Oh, très bien. I'm doing very well, Father. Julien, can I ask you something? Because you're coming each day to church. Yes, Father, yes, every day. It's the month of May, I'm coming every day. So, Julien, what are you doing when you're standing there? Oh, Julien said, I'm not doing anything. But what do you say? Do you pray? What do you say to God? He said, Father, I'm not saying anything. I'm just looking, and he is looking back. Je l'avise et il m'avise in French. You know, avise is like looking intensely, you know, wholeheartedly. So I'm looking wholeheartedly, and he is looking, Jesus is looking wholeheartedly back. And so the novice master said, that's how I talk to them about praying. And I was really touched. And afterwards on our walk, I talked with Gunnar Roshi about what he said. And, you know, Gunnar Roshi said, well, that's our practice. That's basically what our practice is. You know, just seeing until the seer is forgotten and there is the seeing back in a way. So I think with the Van Eyck painting, I think that's for me, it was an inspiring entry into the painting. So let's have a look again. Here we have the outside, the closed altarpiece. So we see, if we look carefully, the lower register. We see actually the statues of two biblical men. In the middle, on the left, we have a sculpture, almost a trompe-l'oeil. We see a niche, a Gothic niche. So it's as if we're in the church. And we see this bearded man pointing to the Lamb. And it's John the Baptist, the one who recognized Jesus, who said, see the Lamb, ecce agnus Dei. So he's pointing. He was the one who saw. He was the prophet, the last prophet who saw. And the one on his right, the young man, the sculpture of the young man with the curly hair and the chalice, is, as the text says below the sculpture, John the Evangelist, who wrote the fourth gospel and who will be the visionary writer of the apocalypse, the revelation of Saint John. At the revelation, something is revealed, something is seen for the first time. So both, and I think it's very interesting, both those saints have something to see with seeing anew, seeing things, as we would say, seeing things in relation. The church for which the altarpiece was designed at the time was called the St. John Church. The church was dedicated to St. John the Baptist, and so the whole altarpiece gives an important place to both these people known as St. John, the Baptist and the Evangelist. And on their sides, we see the two donors. On the right, we see the woman, Elizabeth Beaulut, the daughter of a very wealthy family here in Ghent. And she is kneeling. She is presented as praying. And on the far left, we see her husband, Josse Veit, Judocus Veit, who was a very wealthy merchant and who became like the burgomaster, like the mayor of the city for some time. Both are well dressed in color, but without jewelry, although the man is carrying his money purse, his black money purse. Very interesting, I think, is the gaze of the people represented. The two statues are actually looking down, not particularly looking at the two people, but the two people are looking up. And actually they're looking up, they're looking at the scene above. And I think it's very telling, because although they were very wealthy and very successful in their lives, they had no children. So here they're represented at the end of their life, and they decided to donate most of their money to the church. And part of that was the commission of the altarpiece and the redesigning of the chapel. And they paid for eternal mass. So for their, how would I say, for the salvation of their soul, they paid that each day a mass, a Eucharist, would be celebrated in front of the painting on the altar of the side, the chapel of the church that they redecorated. And actually, this habit of having each day a Eucharist in that chapel went on until the French Revolution, until the French came here to occupy Flanders, and then it stopped, the tradition. But so for almost 500 years, every day a mass was celebrated in front of this painting for the well-being of those two people. And I think it's very telling that the woman, the angel Gabriel of the Annunciation is looking at the Virgin, at Mary. But Elizabeth is actually looking up to the angel, as if on the one hand she has like a vision of this episode from the gospel, and on the other hand, as if she feels spoken to by the angel in a certain way. and Mary and Elizabeth are at, at this side. So I think there is a very tender aspects in the fact that she looks up to the angel, and then her husband is actually looking up to the Virgin. So here you can see in the restored painting really the delicacy of the gaze, looking up. And here we have actually the key to the whole painting. It's the Annunciation. The angel comes to announce to this young woman that she will carry the Son of God. And we see Mary, she was reading a book, actually. She's like taken by surprise in a medieval interior with a view, a room with a view, with a window, an open window, and another window on a garden there, and an empty space here in the middle. And we see the angel holding the lily and speaking the words, Ave gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Ave, hail, salut, plein de grâce, full of grace, and the Lord is with thee. And the words are actually written on the painting, and we can read them. And then on the other side, she responds. And the dove, the Holy Spirit, is present, and she responds, but her words are in mirror writing and upside down. So we cannot read them. They can only be read from above, from the standpoint, from the point of view of the one who is above. And she answers, Ecce ancilla Deum, behold, here is the handmaiden of the Lord. And it's with this scene, with this meeting, this intimate meeting between the messenger of this transcendent reality, and this young woman saying yes to it, that the whole story of salvation actually will start. I've been always very struck that in the middle of the scene, it's actually an empty space or an empty room. We have a beautiful still life, and I'll come back to that later here, of a basin, a water basin, with a little container there, and a white piece of cloth hanging there, white. And right parallel to that, this black pillars, two black pillars. The lightest, and painters will know this, the brightest and the lightest spot of the painting and the darkest spot of the painting are right next to each other, giving a strong contrast. Black and white. Makes me think of Sikiso Keicho, who said, it is like a strip of white silk without words. When he spoke about the preciousness of mind, it's like a strip of white silk without words. Or as we have in one of the kirigami, original face, it's like the rochu in Japanese, the pillar. It's the clear and open mind is like the pillar. Makes me think. So, and here opens the story. Actually, let me come back. On top, we have 4 figures. These are 2 prophets, Zacharias and Micah, and 2 sibyls, we say, people who spoke about the future. The 4 of them have actually, in one way or another, announced the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the One. So this whole closed part of the altarpiece is actually about a promise. The promise of the prophet, St. John the Baptist, the vision of St. John the Evangelist, of the times to come, of ultimate salvation, which we will see on the inside, and then the promise, the covenant that is renewed in this meeting between the angel and Mary, and those people who spoke about things to come. So it's basically about, the whole outside is about, well, it's a kind about a promise, you know, about good things, the good news, which is the meaning of the word evangelion, the good news. Just a little historical thing that has certain meaning. Sometimes altarpieces, and this is just a scheme, this is not a scheme related to the to our painting, but sometimes altarpiece had a kind of foot, which is called a predella, a piece under on which the actual painting was resting. It's called a predella. And we know from historical sources that originally our painting, so under the donators, our painting had also a foot with a representation of Christ in limbo, which is a story, Christ going to purgatory, you know, after his dying on the Friday and before the resurrection on Easter, on the silent Saturday, on the Holy Saturday, according to some scriptures, it said that Christ descended into purgatory, into hell even, to save the righteous people, to save Adam and Eve, to save Noah, to save all the ancestors there. And those were not really in hell, but they were waiting at the end of time. So it has the promise that even for those who have not seen the light during their lifetime, and I think it's very telling for those 2 human people here, those 2 humans, the donors, even those who have not seen the light in their life, those too will be saved. The predella, though, we know from a witness, was destroyed during a cleaning, probably in the 16th century. We don't know the date. Due to mistreatment, we missed that piece. So this is the inside. So this was only opened during special days. And again, we have two registers. The lower part, which is actually a landscape with a bird's view. We look from above onto the scene in this green, lush landscape. And we see clearly the blue sky with the clouds. And in the far distance, we will have a look at it. We will see a beautiful city, the heavenly Jerusalem. But it represents us a view on earth, on our environment, on nature, with a lot of people there. Almost 200 people are represented in this lower register. And then we have the upper register, which seems to represent a scene, a heavenly scene, where we have the triad in the middle, flanked by singing angels on the left and angels playing music with instruments on the right, and then flanked by Eve and Adam. Eve and Adam, which on the outside was announced that they would be saved. So here they come. They come out of this dark niche, which does not have the same color nor the same floor as the representation of heaven. They come as they are, naked. And actually the representation of Adam and Eve, naked, is the first nude in the art of the north and the art of above the Alps in the history of painting in the West. The first in Florence was Masaccio, 1427, in his fresque in the Carmichael Church, and then Van Eyck is the first representation of the first woman and man. But let's have a closer look. So very telling is again the color difference between the outer panels with Eve and Adam, and above them the representation of the sad story of Cain and Abel. On the left, Abel is offering and Cain is jealous. And on the right, we see how Cain kills his brother. But here we see the saved woman and man. And then in the middle, we have this throning Godhead. Art historians and theologians are still not agreeing, is this the representation of God the Father or of God the Son? And there are a number of reasons why, although he looks very Christ-like with his beard. He is holding this very specific mudra, Christian mudra, where the two fingers are together, indicating this very specific article of Christian faith that Jesus has a dual nature. He is completely God and he is completely human. He is together, the two, which is like a paradox in a way. But the mudra indicates this article of faith, that the Son of Man is 100% Son of Man, but 100% Son of God. He is dressed in red. The color of life, the color of blood, the color of love also. And here above we have actually the representation of these three colors. Mary in blue, John in green, and in the middle the Godhead in red. Which were very important, those colors in medieval times. Blue was the color of Mary. She is the last person of the old covenant. The light has not come in the world. So the colors on the north side, like in the Notre Dame in Paris, of the North Rose window, it's all in bluish tones. The sun never comes there. It's cool in color. It's faith. It's the virtue of faith. On the south transept of the Notre Dame, we see the whole roses window, the story of the Gospels, of the present time. The rose window is kind of illuminated by the sun. It's vibrant, and its all over tone is red. The color of the present, the color of aliveness and of love. And then on the west side, where the sun is setting, we have the rose window telling us about the future, about the apocalypse, about the time to come, which has the color of hope, of green, of the renewal. The sun sets and will come up again, and so. So these three colors indicate the three times, the past, the present, and the future, but also the three virtues of faith, love, and hope. And I couldn't help of showing this beautiful, endearing, small statue from the Gandhara region, an early Buddha, one of the earliest representation, deeply influenced by Greek art, where we see the throning Buddha, also with a nimbus of light around his head, holding his hand also in the mudra, but here the mudra of no fear, and in his right hand holding a staff. The staff has disappeared, but I think it's striking in its parallel to the posture of the Godhead.
Wow, amazing.
These panels have not been restored yet, and they expect actually that there is quite a lot of new elements they're going to discover. For instance, the background, the blue background, we know for sure that it's not original. It seems also that the floor might be different. So they expect that some new discoveries will be made. Interestingly, in San Francisco, and I'm really sorry for the bad quality of the representation, but in San Francisco, they have a triad with the Buddha, Manjushri on the left in blue, sitting on the elephant, the Bodhisattva of wisdom in blue, and the Buddha Shakyamuni in red, and on the right, Fugen, Samantabhadra in green, sitting on the lion. It's a kind of, probably a kind of coincidence, but it has the same color scheme. So here we see this whole painting, the inside, in all its colorfulness. And let's have a look at the lower register, which is like one landscape. And on the side, we see people approaching. And in the middle panel, we see people standing and kneeling, people coming from afar, coming close to the altar where the lamb, where we see where the lamb is standing on the altar. Above, we see the dove of the spirit. We could say the functioning, And below, under the altar, we see the fountain of life, the life-giving water, which is baptism, in a way. And so the people gather to bear witness to the sacred moment of the offering of the lamb, the lamb, the Eastern lamb, the lamb that will be broken, which is the symbol for Eucharist, for the communion. And people gather from all over. On the left, we see the just judges coming on their horses, flanked by the knights of Christ, the soldiers, the kings, the harnessed, David, but even Charlemagne. So the people on the left approaching are the people that are active in the world. The judges, the knights. The people on the left are the more contemplative people, the pilgrims on the far right, led by Saint Christopher in red, who is the patron saint of the pilgrims. And we see the different pilgrims, the Compostela people we see with the shell. And then on the inside, on the right, we see the hermits, Saint Anthony and different hermits, the contemplatives. They're all approaching. Those four wings represent the cardinal virtues. like justice, fortitude, temperance, and prudence. That's how it's considered. And they approach this scene in the middle, where we see the lamb on the altar, and in the far distance, the heavenly Jerusalem, right? The future of mankind, the salvation of humankind. And there's a lot to say about the people, but on the left we have here a group of the prophets kneeling, reading in the scriptures, people from Jewish tradition, strangers, even Chinese heads we have there. So Jewish and other people here. And on the right we have the 12 apostles, plus Paul and Saint Thomas, they assume, and the people of the church, popes and bishops and monks and priests. And in the far distance, the holy women approach, and other people, martyrs and confessors, approach to come close to this moment of revelation, where the lamb offers itself. And again, there is reference to faith here on the left, to hope and to faith, to hope and to love. I mean, in the Buddhist tradition, the notion of self-sacrifice has a very different flavor. Siddhartha, in his way, in his search of finding his truth, at first meant that his own body was in the way of his freedom. And he pursued this way of asceticism, where he almost came to the point of destruction, of self-destruction, where he realized that was not the way. That the way to deny himself, to deny his corporality, was not the way. And we have in some stories, like with the rabbit in the moon, the rabbit throwing himself into the fire to feed an old, weak man. It's one of the Jakata tales. So this notion of self-sacrifice, the bodhisattva for sure. But it has a different flavor. Let's have a look at to finish, I would like to share a website which is kind of disappeared, I know. Okay. All right. So, so here we are. So, in my sense, and to conclude this presentation, I think the key to opening our approach to the painting is in this closed altarpiece, where people come and contemplate and pray in front of this representation. I try to imagine myself going to church and seeing the scene. The scene speaks about surrendering to prayer, and surrendering to that what is asked of us, to do, like this young woman is doing. Not so much, like we saw with the sculpture of the Buddha, by kind of denying our humanity, but by really fulfilling our humanity, by surrendering to our deeper calling. And that's why I'm in a way so touched by the painting. That for us humans living in this realm, like those two people with their pain at the end of their life, knowing that their life will end, and in their trusts and their trusting vision, that actually in the surrender, in the lâcher prise, what they envision here lies in a way the fulfillment of their life. Okay. Dear friends, I would like to stop here for a moment and take a break so we can do what we need to do. I would be very happy in a couple of minutes, in 10 minutes, to come back together and to maybe listen to some questions or remarks and to engage in a kind of exchange.
Good evening, everyone. I'm curious about image I saw in the picture, in the painting, and you didn't talk about it. The hermit, I think, behind them, yeah. There was two women. Yeah.
Yes. Let's have a look at them.
That's what? Sorry?
Let's have a look at them.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
So this is the panel of the hermits. Now we see in the front all those bearded men. This we know is Saint Anthony in the desert, the father of Western hermits, basically, the founder of the monastics. It's very interestingly, they're wearing a kind of almost, it's like crystal malas, you see? It's in crystal colored pearls. He has the famous Tau on his cloak, the symbol of Saint Anthony of the Desert and later of Saint Francis. These are all men, and in the background we see two women. And one we do recognize. I mean, I couldn't go into detail, but these beautiful young women, it's like, but we're not sure who this woman is. But there is a kind of agreement that she is the famous hermit. I mean, tradition says that actually by boat she came from the country of Israel to southern France, and she landed in Sainte Marie de la Mer, and she made her way up to Vézelay even. That's what the story says. So this is a representation of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene carrying this precious container with the balm. And so after the dying of Christ, after the death of her teacher, she retired. She retreated into the desert, and history says that she came to southern France. And actually, her remains are preserved as a relic in the Madeleine Cathedral in Vézelay. Yeah, it's striking, huh? And in this rocky environment, it's very in this lush green, in this wilderness, in these woods, with even southern trees, with the cypresses. Yeah, great. Maybe interestingly enough, here is even this landscape is even more Mediterranean, with the palm trees and the cypresses. This is Saint Christopher, was considered a giant. He was a very tall man. He was the one who carried the child across the river, and the child turned out being Jesus Christ. That's why his name, Christopheren, the one who carries Christ. And we see the pilgrims with their staffs, with their shells. This pilgrim even has this insignia of the three great pilgrimages, the one to Jerusalem, which is this sign, the one to Rome, which is this sign, and the one to Compostela, which is this sign. Here we don't have women. Okay. So someone else? Question? Something? Frédéric?
Yes. What was the size? Hello, everybody. What is the size of those paintings? Because they seem to be huge.
Well, it's a large painting. It's about 3.5 meters high and 460 large. It's 20 square meters. It's huge. It's monumental. Yeah.
Yes, because I was just watching, and it seems really, really big and impressive.
It is very impressive, and that was also the goal, to impress. You know, when it's open, especially when it's open, to really impress. When it's closed, it's much more subdued, as you could see with the colors. It's only 2 meters 30 large then, and the colors are subdued, but when it's open, it's really... We know from testimony, Albrecht Dürer, the great German painter, visited Ghent in 1521, and he was like totally blown away by the painting. I mean,
yes, because the vividness of the color, the size.
Also the depth of the colors, you know, with this new oil paint technique, the glazing, the transparency. Let me show you another detail to show, you know, Van Eyck started in the tradition of illumination, you know, this detailed small illustrations of precious books. And let me show you a couple of those details. So this is the painting that is not restored yet. So the colors are a little faded. So here we have these angels singing. All those angels are carrying a cross. The other angels are not having a cross, but you know. So we see, you know, it's very detailed. The brocade, the sculpture, St. George here killing the dragon, the little monkey, the tiles on the floor, you know, with the lamb there, the inscription in hoc signa, in his sign, all those details. But let's go a little closer, and we see how Van Eyck painted the brocade, the gold, the jewelry here. And then look at the brush. The painting was installed in a side chapel. And if we look closely into detail, into the blue precious stone, we see actually the reflection of the real church window in the blue stone in the brush of the angel. You see that?
And the hands?
And the hands. Yeah. Let me show you another detail here. So that's before and that's after restoration. I think it's a very important aspect regarding the story about the novice master. Je l'avise et il m'avise. So this was the lamb on the altar. Here we have in Latin on the altar, Ecce agnus Dei, behold the lamb of the Lord that carries all the sins of the world. And so the lamb was represented here with the eyes in a kind of anatomical correct way. But with the restoration, they found actually that Van Eyck originally had painted the lamb looking straight at the spectator, at us. You see, not as anatomically correct that the eyes are on the side of the head of the lamb, but it's really like in a face facing us, staring directly at us. And that was intentional. You know, that if you would look at the painting and look at the lamb, that you would feel that the lamb looks at you. So that by really intensely looking at it, that actually wholehearted looking, that the separation between you and the representation kind of dissolves. And realizing that the lamb is not something outside of myself. I am the lamb. I am the one who's broken. And within my brokenness, what?
And the face of the lamb is kind of a human, anthropomorphic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So there is another interesting detail they found. So the painting was restored and overpainted, but here, if you look at the landscape, here it was kind of these blue hills, but these are all overpaintings. So actually Van Eyck painted these mountain ranges with snow and this river going into the deep valleys there. And actually he painted architecture we can recognize. This is the cathedral of Our Lady in Bruges. We can recognize the tower, which was covered up in old overpaintings here. This is a detail from the Tower of Ghent here, this one. All right. Okay. Someone else? Isabel?
Yes, thank you very much for your explanation. And I was curious, when the painting is closed, you mentioned that there is an open space and that there is a basin and the tower and water. And the connection is that as the lamb is supposed to wash all your sins, then you have this image of the water and the towel.
Well, you know, it's assumed that the pure water and the white cloth is a symbol of purity. Symbol of purity. It's in that scene. It's the purity of Mary, who is, you know, who is addressed by the angel who's carrying the lily, another symbol of purity. She was a virgin, the kind of, she is a mother and a virgin, but her intentions is pure. But I would like to have a look at this still life and at the view, because I think it's really very particular that this is in the middle of the painting. So let's go back. It's quite a difference if you see the color scheme before and after restoration. I think it's a beautiful rendition of the light. The light here on the copper basin, in this container, this hanging container at the chain, and then this white cloth with a little window with the trilobe stained glass there. And then this view. Historians have pinpointed actually the view. They think it's a view on a street in Ghent. And if that is true, then it means that the light, it's early day. And you see this bright sunlight falling and the shadows of the houses. And really, if you go into to see the people in the streets here, in the shadow and the light, people are sitting there at the window. The birds flying around the church tower there. And very telling, I think, those at the gate of the city walls, these people standing facing the light. And the light is coming from the east. It's almost this mystical light. So there's this whole play of outside and inside. Inside, this is an empty space. Outside, this busy life, you know. Okay. One last question or remark? Debbie.
I don't have any questions, or I have too many questions, but I wanted to say thank you, Frank. It's so interesting. How do you know all this? It's really, really interesting to be able to. It's like reading the painting becomes a book with all the stories that are behind it. So thank you so much.
Well, what I intended to do, but maybe I was not so clear about it, I think that there is a strong parallel between the message of the painting, which is about, you know, surrendering, really surrendering, letting go of a narrow sense of self into this larger dimension of our being. And this letting go, like the lamb that is offered, or Mary that says yes. And I think there is a close parallel to an aspect of our practice, where we let go of this kind of narrow self to open up to this, you know, larger being that we are, which is connected and in a relationship. And a way to do it is to really see, to do things wholeheartedly, to see, so that relationship is established. Relationship which is already there, but then it's seen anew. It's envisioned in a way. So thank you, Debbie. Okay, Amy, Roshi, I think we approach 10 o'clock. I hand over the word to you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope people enjoyed it a little bit. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank Roshi. I might just add that your Dharma name is Vue Immédiate, so there is a clear impression of seeing in your practice and who you are, and thank you for sharing that. Just seeing with us. I also wondered if you talked about the blue and the red and the green. And of course, I think of that immediately in terms of the Buddha family, of the Vajra and the Padma and the Karma families, and the wisdom and the compassion, and then the interworking of the two of them. And that made me think of, like what you said about surrendering and fulfilling our humanity is kind of in the mix of those three and the interworking of those three, something like that. Which is beautiful. Yeah.